Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Growers Live. I am Josh Satin. Super excited to be here. Like always, I have a very special guest tonight, Brian Bates from Bear Creek Organic Farm. And man, I'm really excited to have Brian on. Very cool dude. Knows so much about farming and business, and I'm really excited to bring him on. But before we get started, of course, I have a few announcements and a sponsor for tonight as well. So as you guys, if you haven't already watched the show, we'll chat for a while, then we'll take questions from the Patreon page, and then we will take live questions. So if you have live questions, please get those in and we'll get to those. As I said, a couple of announcements. We'll have in 2 weeks, we'll have Jenny Quiner from Urban Patch. Sorry, I forgot Jenny's farm's name. Jenny Quiner, awesome farmer. And we'll have her on. And then I'm really tired tonight. Sorry, guys. And then Jesse Frost will be on April 27th. The Urban Pet. I'm sure Brian will help me out when I get him in here. This is what you get for doing live shows. Also, if you haven't already checked out the new podcasts, we have the Winter Growers podcast with Claire Coleman. Brian was a guest on that show. And we also have the No Till Flowers podcast with Jenny Love. And also, this is a podcast. So if you guys are looking to listen to this later, you can check this out. And anywhere you get your podcast, it's called Growers Live. So let's get on to the sponsor for tonight. We want to thank Farmer's Friend. It's no secret that almost everything grows better in a tunnel. Bring the benefits of greenhouse production to your veggie or flower farm in an affordable and easy to assemble package with Farmer's Friend Caterpillar Tunnel Kits. They're quick to build and move, come in a variety of styles and sizes, and include everything you need to make installation a breeze. Plus, if you order 2 or more tunnels of any size, you'll get free shipping in your entire order. As you guys probably know, I have 2 Caterpillar tunnels from Farmer's Friend at my farm, and I absolutely love them. I'm growing in them right now, and I totally recommend them. Also, be sure to check out Farmer's Friend's growing selection of small farm tools and supplies like the Pyro Weeder, silage tarps, landscape fabric, row covers, shade cloth, irrigation kits, and more. If you're ready to increase efficiency on your farm and earn higher profits with less work, please visit farmersfriend.com today. Okay, I think that was all the announcements. Let's get Brian in here. Brian Bates.
Howdy.
Good to see you, man.
You as well. I tried to save you in the chat there with Jenny's farm. Dog Patch Urban Gardens.
Dog Patch Urban Gardens. I see that now. I still getting used to the software here, but thanks, Brian. I was like, I know Brian will know who she is. Yeah, I'm really excited to talk with Jenny. I know she's doing some really cool stuff over there, so I'll be happy to. But we're talking about Brian today. Brian, tell everyone here a little bit about. First of all, before I let you introduce yourself, I want to say something. When I started getting into farming, I definitely saw you online and thought of you as like a farmer. I was like, oh, he's got it together. Like, I love what you were doing, and I'm really happy to have you here. And if people aren't aware of what you're up to, you should go see, because Brian, you run a very different kind of farm, I feel like, and especially where you are. So if you can talk a little bit about, your farm, maybe your background a little bit, what you guys have going on, that'd be great, just for people to sort of catch up with what you're up to.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's very kind of you to say. I would say, fake it till you make it. We try to make it look like we've got it together. Yeah, so our farm is Bear Creek Organic Farm. We're in Petoskey, Michigan. So we're in really like northern Michigan. We call it northern lower Michigan. So if Michigan's a mitten, we're at the tip of the finger. And so it's northern climate, zone 5A for those that are into zones. Small town. So our Petoskey is a town of 6,000 people. County is 30,000, mostly rural. Kind of a big summer area for people from downstate come up north and go out on the boat and have a cottage or whatever they do. But we are transplants here. So I'm not from Petoskey. My wife's not from Petoskey. I'm from Virginia originally, and she's from Indiana. And I went to Penn State, and she went to art school, and then she went to Indiana University for grad school. And then, we dated long distance for 5.5 years. First time we lived in the same time zone was when we moved to Petoskey. So this was a big step for us, and we just knew we wanted to move north to sort of preempt climate change and things like that. So we were looking for a northern location that would have plenty of fresh water, reasonable land prices, and like a good town feel. I'm from like a suburban area. She's from a super rural area. And we just thought having this like nice downtown was something that we craved. She's an artist and art instructor. And I was interested in good food. And so we wanted a place that had that kind of vibe. So that's a little bit on like our history, just sort of concerned with climate change. I'm not from a farming family. Her grandfather was a farmer, but like cattle, corn, not really market farming. And we really got interested. Basically, I got interested in college at Penn State. I went there to do something totally different, but was really drawn to beekeeping 101 and just got really drawn into some of this agricultural stuff. And I wanted to save the world, and I wanted to find my best way to help save the planet. And so it seemed like farming would be a nice way to work with my hands, which I've always enjoyed doing, but do it with purpose. And so I'd done landscaping type jobs in the past, and that felt nice, but it's kind of like, ornamental. And in college, I was exposed to the idea of like productive landscapes versus ornamental landscapes. And I thought, I want to be a part of productive landscapes, which I had never really thought about in those terms. So that was sort of what got us bit by the farming bug. Our farm as it stands now, we are in our 8th growing season. It's been a wild ride. It's nothing like what we expected. We intended to have a small homestead, and that was kind of our goal, was like homestead on steroids. And after 5 years, maybe I could quit my day job, which at the time was working at an like a grocery co-op, like a organic grocery co-op, like a natural food store. And then like pie in the sky, maybe in 10 years, like it's enough to be some like income replacement for the two of us. And we just really thought, from working on other farms and talking to other growers, there just wasn't a ton of money to be had in farming. And I think that really helped measure our expectations. And we quickly learned how sort of wrong we were, and there was a lot of opportunity. And so 15 months in, I went full time on the farm. So that 5 years shrunk down to 15 months. And then we thought Anne would do it in like 3 or 4 years. And then she got a super good job offer locally, going from a adjunct professor to a full-time professor at the local community college. So she jumped at that. Which is great because she still has the summers off and we can do farm stuff together. So we've grown quite a bit. We're a small farm. We have 75 acres, but we're growing on, this year we'll be cultivating about 4, and at least a full acre of that's in cover crop every year. And a lot of that has to do with our garlic production. And yeah, things have really grown. Year 1, $26,000 in sales. Last year, $660,000 in sales in year 7. So it's been about $100,000 in growth each year for the last 7 years, which is like insane to me. Our 10-year target was 150 grand. Like that was literally written down on paper, submitted to our loan officer. That was our dream goal. So we did that in year 2.5. So yeah, so it's been a wild ride. We never wanted to have employees. Now we have 9 employees. We thought maybe one time we would have 1 greenhouse. We have 10 greenhouses now. So just a lot of like, it's just felt like a lot of keeping up with demand. Like we've put out a good thing. We've met great people. We've stayed true to our word, and people have just really gravitated towards it. And so even in a small community, it's been really cool to see just how much market there is for good food, and for good food from people you know and people you like. And so that's been really fun, by far the most rewarding part of this job. And we set out from the get-go, being in a resort area, we knew we wanted to sell to our neighbors. So there's a lot of businesses up here that sell like fudge and whatever, tours and like, you know what I mean? Like summer recreational things that are open for like 3 months. And we knew that we wanted to have like a price point and a business model that was like a little more focused on our neighbors. So that's the broad scope. In terms of our business, we don't grow a wide range of crops. It's always really disappointing for a lot of people to hear. I can't help you with your carrots, your beets, or your radishes, or your potatoes. I just don't know barely anything about those crops. Half of our business, 50% of our business, is salad greens, primarily Salanova, microgreens, tomatoes, and in a distant fourth is garlic. Those 4 crop categories are 50% of our business. And then another third of our business has to do with like selling plants. So organic garden transplants, like tomato plants and pepper plants and things like that, potted herbs, which we do a lot of, and then like things we sell to help people grow their plants, like compost and soil and things like that. So that's a third. those 4 crops are 50%. And then all the rest of the stuff, I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget what else we grow. Onions, cucumbers, edible flowers, peppers, fresh herbs, honey, all that stuff is all just comprising, 10%. I mean, it's really not a lot of the business.
All right. So Brian, I think you can, maybe people watching can understand why I said what I said at the beginning of the show here, why I was always impressed by what you guys are doing. You're like, oh yeah, we were shooting for 150 and and you just rattled off a whole bunch of different enterprises that are all very different and I think challenging in their own way. And also you're in Michigan. So, that makes a different growing, has different growing challenges also. But I want to point out one thing. I think, I don't know if it was on Farmer to Farmer when I first heard you, where you were on that podcast, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And maybe you were talking about the decision to live in Michigan for preemptive climate change. And I was like, I have never heard someone say that before. And I think that's logically makes complete sense, right? Like, I get it. I would never think about that, but I love that was part of your decision making. I think this speaks a lot to your background and the fact that a lot of farmers in the small scale movement they're not farmers. Like they don't come from a farming family. How do you think, have you seen a lot of that with other farmers or how is that really, I feel like you just do whatever you like. You're not like held to like, well, this is how you do it.
Oh
like,
yeah.
I feel like that really opens your possibilities up completely.
No doubt about it. I've said that all the time. Like one of the best things about our farm and our farm business and our journey is that we don't have any dad or granddad like telling us how it should be or whatever. And we don't have any existing infrastructure that well, we've got this old barn and it's got a basement. Like, can we turn that into a wash pack? Like, will it be food safe enough? You know what I mean? Like those conundrums that I see other growers face. On the flip side, when we started out and even still today, when shit goes wrong, can I say that? Is that okay?
You just did.
When stuff goes bad, I don't have this sort of institutional knowledge. I don't have my dad next door who's been like, oh yeah, I've had that happen a dozen times. There's none of that. And in the early days, that felt so alone. The Google machine did not understand my problems. This thing would not fit on this thing. And there was no way to get an answer. And there was nobody with another vegetable farm or this tractor or whatever. So that was a super challenge. So we didn't have that institutional knowledge to hold us back, but we also didn't have it to lean on and lean into. And the same goes for infrastructure. We didn't inherit any old or misfit infrastructure or equipment, but we didn't inherit any. So we had to do it all from scratch and borrow a boatload of money and build a bunch of buildings and buy a bunch of things and trial and error our way through that process. So that's definitely, I definitely think it's made us who we are. And I definitely don't feel beholden to anybody's rules. Probably the biggest decision we both were on the same page with, meaning my wife and I, who we run the farm together. Probably the biggest decision we were both on the same page on was that we knew we weren't going to do a CSA. And we knew we didn't want to do a CSA model of anything. And that really helped chop out a lot, right? I mean, that really helped us, in addition to not feeling beholden to a multi-generational farm business, we didn't feel beholden to grow everything under the sun. We didn't feel like we were going to have to answer to somebody's box that only had 8 things and they were promised 9. We kind of eliminated that stress from our life. And we thought we'd be better off not trying to be a jack of all trades and master of none, but maybe not a master, but maybe pretty good at a handful.
Yeah, I like that approach a lot. I think that as I meet more farmers that don't have, in fact, most farmers I talk to have never, don't have a family that farms in the small scale space. And I think everyone brings something completely different to it. And so I love that angle. But as you were saying, when you started this, would you say this was your 7th, 9th season?
This is our 8th year. Yeah.
8th year. There wasn't as much internet information out there as there is now. And so I think it's really nice that, all of us can share this stuff now and people can see examples in different areas doing different things. Cause I think it allows people to be more successful. So
yeah. And I went to a lot of conferences. I I have such a soft spot for the conference style of farm conferences. I find people to be very, very generous, and the people that gather there to share a lot of information. And I'm grateful that there's all these internet resources now. Like, my life's busier and we have kids and there's COVID. So like, it's great. There's a lot on the internet. But when I think about some of the big, like those big questions that I was trying to sort of unpack and figure out, conferences were really helpful to, like, you know, go snag lunch with Paul and Sandy Arnold and like pick their brains and like, you know, sort of get them off the record. And so I think of some of those conversations I've had at really random conferences have really helped mold us into who we are. The other thing is, my wife and I had not run a business together. I had a couple of small things in like middle school and high school, but we really binged on The Profit, which is a television show with Marcus Lemonis, and Shark Tank to a lesser degree. But The Profit was actually recommended to us by our business counselor, and that really helped. Conferences gave us a joint farming language to talk to each other into. Like, we could, you know, have shared terms, but then The Profit gave us like a shared business vernacular to use with one another to try to like articulate what it is we were trying to say, or how it is we were feeling, or whatever, even with just with one another. And so in addition to trying to mold how this farm was going to operate, there was a whole relationship and business relationship component of like, there's two of us in this. We built this together. This was not like my idea that Anne married into, or vice versa. We did it together. And a lot of things I would have done, she is quick to remind me, she stopped me from doing. So I think that there's been a lot of give and take on that type of thing.
All right. Very cool. Yeah. I think anytime that farmers get together, it's, off the record, you know, just hanging around chatting is there. That stuff is so invaluable. I know the couple of workshops that we did, like the side conversations and people going out for drinks the night before and stuff like that. Is just, that's when everyone like gets to know everyone and talks about all the things that like really you want to talk about.
And it helps break down some of those barriers you can't break down online. So like, let's say I have a hallway conversation with somebody at a conference. I mean, Chris Blanchard is a good example. I had met him at a conference and did an all-day workshop with him, but then it was like, having a meal with him kind of made us a little more familiar. So then like when I had a question later on, I didn't feel so awkward sending him an email and just worrying like, will he ever reply? And I don't know if he would remember me or not, that type of thing. Like, it wasn't about that. It broke the ice in having that dialogue. And I feel that way with lots of growers, you know, across the board.
Cool. All right. I have a million questions for you, Brian. Let's talk about some farming stuff. Let's talk about soil practices and stuff like that. So you're on 4 acres of cultivated land. How do you manage that with your staff in terms of preparing beds, like, you know, rotations? I don't know what kind of amendments you're using, that kind of stuff. Like some of the nuts and bolts on your farm would be cool.
Yeah, for sure. So in spite of the hat on your head, we till. So our primary tillage is a disc harrow on the tractor. And that's sort of the main tool we use. Okay, how do we think about our fields? Well, I do all the field prep, even still. That's all on me, which is fine. I own that. It's an easy thing to do late in the day, early in the day, on the weekend. I don't need like a crew to help me do that. So I do all the field prep, but garlic kind of steers the ship, right? So we have garlic on a 4-year rotation, and that is our original business plan had garlic as like the center of our business, garlic and honey. And so garlic, if we're planting a 1/2 acre of garlic, which I think we did, I don't know, last year or the year before, I can't remember. But if we were hypothetically planting a 1/2 acre of garlic, then we would want 2 acres available so we can do a 4-year rotation of that 1/2 acre. So it's not in the same spot until year 5, okay? So that steers the ship for like the biggest chunk that we're moving around the farm. Garlic also has no real major deer pressure. So it's a great, you know, we have no deer fence and we just kind of get lucky and take our chances. And we got 2 big dogs, but like we don't have a deer fence. And so garlic is kind of my like pioneer species when I'm getting into new ground. Like if we're going to go from 3 acres to 4 acres, that 4th acre is going to be garlic or rotation for garlic. And so we're not putting like delicious lettuce right in the furthest field. But garlic is the base crop. That's the 4-year. And that kind of steers the soil system. So that's a bare fallow for the whole season leading up to garlic planting, which is a little unusual. So we're cultivating bare ground from basically now, beginning of mid-April, early May, if we can get into the field. We cultivate that every 7 to 10 days-ish. It's not perfect, but that's the goal. Until we harvest this year's garlic crop. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
The idea being we're trying to germinate off all the weeds that germinate in the life cycle of garlic. So if we're growing a big field of garlic without mulch, which we don't use mulch, so if we're growing a big field of garlic without mulch, then we don't really care about the weeds that germinate mid-July through fall, because that's not going to affect this garlic. So we're really focusing on the early spring and early summer weeds and keeping those down. This is a concept from Eric and Ann Nordell, weed the soil, not the crop. And it's a lot easier to cultivate a bare field than in between little rows of crops. And they're just fabulous farmers in Pennsylvania. And so that's this concept that we're implementing. So it's bare fallow until the garlic would be planted. Or I'm sorry, would be harvested.
Harvested. Yeah.
Then when mid-July hits, like the day we're harvesting garlic from the other field, next year's garlic field goes into heavy cover crop mix as quick as we can. Maybe like a buckwheat or sun hemp or sorghum or something. Quick as we can, get it up, mow it down, flail mow it, another cover crop, heavy as we can, get it up. So we try to cram in 2 biomass-focused cover crops from garlic harvest to garlic planting. And that's like a really critical, like get all that organic matter in that field as much as we can. That's the garlic piece. And then we kind of have, this isn't how it started out, but it's effectively now we have this, basically it's the vegetable area. And so that's just where we're growing basically Salanova and herbs on repeat. So it's a big block, maybe, I don't really know how big it is. It's less than an acre. So it's hand planted. I mean, it's all like we're doing tillage with the tractor, but everything else is by hand, paper pot, transplanter, or an earthway seed.
Market garden style.
Yep, for sure.
Yep.
But no beds. So I'm anti-beds. It's all rows, but it's not tractor rows, it's wheel rows. So all of our lettuce and herbs in the field are 8 inches apart, and it's just a block. Just like keeps going.
Okay.
Just 100 feet of 8 inches apart.
This is where the non-farming, like you mix all the techniques here. You're like, oh, we're going to mark around, but we're not going to put beds in. We're just going to, all right. So how do you manage that? Like, is it just like timing and you just work from one end to the other, or
Yep.
How does that work?
Okay. It's like a typewriter. So we've got that field. It's a rectangle, and this is just happenstance, but it's super awesome. 6-inch paper chain pots, like 136 feet ish, which happens to be the exact length of our plantable area in every hoop house. We did not know that when we built them, but man, it's awesome. So like you put a tray in, go to the end, done with the tray. Like there's no ripping and coming around and all that crap.
It's amazing.
So that's the hoop house planting. And then we flip, and opposite the hoop houses is this field I'm describing. And it's also like 145, 150 feet ish. And so it's just this one row, 6-inch. And so we plant Salanova like every 10 days. And I don't know, I think this year it'll probably be like 40 or 45 trays, like rows per 10-day planting. So it's a good chunk. I mean, we're not like setting records, but it's 45 trays per planting. And so, yeah, whatever that is, I'll just do 45 times 8 divided by 12, 30 feet. Okay, so that's super convenient. I mean, like, dude, I love when math works like this. 30 feet is the width of a hoop house. That's perfect. So that's a 30-foot chunk. We're going to put that in, let's say, May 10th. Then right next to it, May 20th is going to be another 30-foot chunk. May 30th, another 30-foot chunk. And then we keep going, and that's 30 feet, that field. The exact dimensions don't matter. But basically, by the time we get to the end of that field, the first one is harvested and done. So that first crop, we flail mow like right into the ground. So we flail mow it, disc it. This year we're going to add a cultipack pass and then plant it again. And like off we go again. And so we can usually get.
So how many turns do those get in a year? How many turns those get?
Probably our fields are seeing 2 crops a year, most of the spots, and we have 10 to 12 summer plantings of Salanova.
Okay. All right, cool. I love that garlic. That's super cool. I never thought about the I guess because I don't use that kind of machinery and that kind of like cultivation technique, but to cultivate it during the time it would be growing, that makes a lot of sense. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about your plant sale and transplant stuff. Where did that idea come from? And obviously I see you post about it, and it's a huge part of your business, and it looks like you do a killer job. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, and just stop me, because I love it. I mean, I love it. Like, I love the whole experience. Like, I love it, but I also love what it does for our farm, and I love what it does for our community and our customer base, and it like kicks off the season and all that jazz. And as a, without getting nuts and bolts of the business piece, I love having our highest income month of the year being May, and second half of May, first half of June. I love that as opposed to later. Flip side, we're fully extending our credit in March and April, so it's not, but you get that back faster. So that's a big piece. But how did it start? I think we had just borrowed all this money for a greenhouse, and we were like, dude, we need to pay
what do we plant?
Off. Yeah. So that's where, plants came from that. Like, we don't need all this space yet. Like, we got a micro loan from FSA. It was like a 7-year loan. And we were like, we don't need all this square footage yet for our propagation house. So we made the back half, we planted in the ground, and the front half we put tables. And then half of those tables, we were like, well, we have all the stuff we need, so we should start doing other things. Like, we don't want to leave this space, like we're heating it and watering it and everything. So we put some plants in there, and we sold them like pop up, like in our garage on a Saturday after farmer's market. We would like get home, unload everything, take the folding tables out of the car, put them onto the garage, throw all the plants onto the tables in the garage, and then like open the door and like let people come in. And so it was open for 4 hours, 2 days a week for like 2 weeks. That was it. It was pretty fun. People were pretty happy. Yeah. And so we did more of it. And then the more like we thought about it, it was like, yeah, this is totally logical. Like, there's all this interest in organic gardening. And if you are just like, if you're new to gardening, right? Like, you're not a multi-generational gardener. If you're like a millennial gardener, or even, even older than that, frankly, you want to get plants. Like, where do you go? Like Lowe's, Home Depot? Like, maybe there's a garden center in town, but like most of those places are super conventional, first of all. So if you're like trying to grow an organic garden and then it comes with a tag that's like, this has already been treated, you're like, well, crap, So like, that's not a great experience. But also, those are super flower heavy, like super flower heavy. All those garden centers are really flower heavy. And so we just saw this opportunity to go hard on organic and hard on vegetables and herbs. And so we did that. And herbs, wheels were turning, because I worked at this grocery co-op, and we sold a lot of these living herbs in the produce section. And I saw how much we sold, and I didn't think the price was like that great as a consumer, but like as a grower, I'm like, that's a pretty good price, right? So I was kind of thinking like, maybe we should do that too. So we did start doing a more robust herb program, basil being the star of the show. And that started being really cool. And so that herb program mixed with this emphasis on organic non-flower transplants kind of came together. And boy, it is really cool to like be focused on spring. Like my motto, I always say to my wife is like, I want to own the spring. Like, I want to own the spring. I don't care about pumpkins and cider and donuts and apples. I want to own the spring. And so we've really focused our farm on owning the spring. And I really like it because it's not a very crowded
I think it makes a lot of sense too. In Michigan, people are coming out of the winter. It's like spring is everything.
No doubt. No doubt. Yeah, right.
And so that idea with the plant sale, I actually had seen you guys doing that for years, and I thought it was brilliant. And I actually pitched that when I was at Raleigh City Farm, because we just bought a greenhouse, and I'm like, why don't we do a plant sale, get paid for this really quickly? Yeah. And like no one was on board, and I was like, oh man, I know Brian's killing it with this.
It is a lot of work. I mean, so that is the other the flip side is like, and I talk to growers about this all the time, like you got to think about how you want this plant sale to work for you, because
Right.
pretty quickly our plant sale demand outpaced our farm labor capacity. So like it's super sweet to be having these epic weeks of sales in mid-May, but you also need to like plant 2 tunnels of tomatoes, plant all the crops in the field, like like
it's a whole nother job.
Yeah. Right. So so that has evolved over time, but you can't underestimate the role it plays in the customers, because it gets you in front of them first. And so when they think of spring and vegetables, they think of you. And I don't know what the term is for this, where like you associate somebody with being a resource or an expert, but like we sold vegetables for eating and people liked them and talked to us about them. But once we started selling the vegetables for growing, it was like they thought of us differently. Like, okay, these people know things. Like they're not just growing this, they also can help me grow this. And maybe if I have questions, I'll talk to them. And so it's really deepened our relationship with a lot of customers.
I think there's a lot of people out there that think like, oh, if I sell them tomato starts, then they're not going to buy anything from me. And it's like, it's the exact opposite. Like the more people are growing food for themselves, the more interested they are, they're more going to come and I gotta go ask Brian a question. Let me go give him another $50 of lettuce and everything else. And then maybe I can ask him a question. So the more the interest, the better. I think it's awesome. And I think for your sake, where you are too, if really the only source of getting plant starts is like Home Depot and Lowe's, then you know that all these people are getting organic starts and healthy things that they either can't get or better than what they can buy. So that's awesome. That's a huge advantage to your community.
It is a huge advantage. And like one of the things that we caught on quick was like, people were like, these plants are doing so much better than other plants I buy. And we realized like a lot of home gardeners, I mean, our plants are fine. I'm not saying our plants are like superhuman plants, but a lot of people's gardens are like organic by default or like organic by neglect, right? Like a lot of these gardens that people are planting into is just like topsoil, or somebody sold them like black dirt and they're like, I got the good stuff. And then you do a soil test and it's like a desert, right? And so I think there's this piece of like, when you're getting these jacked up plants from Alabama, which is, most of where the plants from here are coming from Alabama or down south, like those plants have been on some kind of fertilizer drip for some number of weeks by the time they land at Lowe's or Home Depot. When it lands into your garden, it's like, oh, where am I? Like there is nothing to eat here. There's nothing in the soil. I'm starving. And like the plant looks super sick. And so when we're selling a plant that's never had fertilizer added, it's just a compost-based soil mix, that plant just has a better chance of success because it wasn't sort of artificially jacked up to begin with.
Okay. I want to ask you, switch gears a little bit, and then we'll get to questions. Let's talk about Instagram for a minute. I know I'm throwing you curveballs left and right.
Yeah.
I love your Instagram page. And I think if anyone hasn't checked it out, please do. Look, I just got you a few followers, Brian. There you go. Is that you're very thoughtful in your posts, and I find it very inspiring and refreshing to see that. And I think a lot of people wonder how to market. And I think you guys do a great job because you really take people along with the journey on the farm. And you're not just like, I plant this at this spacing, but it's like, here's behind the scenes a little bit. And I even loved you guys. You went on a rant about daylight savings a couple weeks ago. I'm like, like you have very deep, thoughtful posts. Has that always been that way? Or like, has this something you've sort of like, have you been a writer before, or are you just like easing into this? Cause I feel like I love the way you can grab the attention there. It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. That's very, very kind of you. And if somebody does want to follow us on Instagram, you totally can. It's a safe space.
Link down below. Below.
Right, yeah, right. I need to get better at stories. I'm trying so hard because like
they're very different, Brian. They're very different.
Yeah. So, have I always been a writer? No, not in the formal sense. I did have a writing heavy curriculum. It's something I've been decent at. I took one class and
see, I'm not the only one, Brian.
I took one class in high school called expository writing, where you had to do a full essay every 5 days, no matter what. And that forced me to find my voice even when I didn't feel like I had it. Okay. And I look back on that a lot when I'm writing these posts and things and thinking about it. But We went the opposite. My wife did all the social media when we started, and she would write these long posts, and I felt like they were too froofy. And she was this real source of tension in our household. And so then I was like, no, man, I like looked it up and went to this class. Like all the algorithms reward super short posts. So like I was like 2 lines, no more. And so I was like this real like drill sergeant on like short posts, which she was so grumpy about. So we had like she could do 2 long posts a week kind of compromise or whatever. Well, then like I was like, man, we have more to say. And she's like, but you said only 2, right? So it's like this whole back and forth. I'm eating my words, but the algorithms keep changing. Okay. Like that was definitely something that happened is they kept changing. And basically we were kind of going back and forth a little bit on who did what. And then we had our son in July of 2018. And I was like, yo, I can do the posting for a bit if you want to like take a breather and focus on him and everything. And I don't know, just like people started connecting with certain pieces and I started putting stuff out there and I totally gave up on stuff being short. It became like longer and longer. And then I was like, I can't believe Instagram has a character limit. This is so stupid. Like, like it was like, this opposite problem. But what can I say? I think that people buy from people they know. And I think it doesn't matter who you are or where you are or what you do. People like knowing who they're supporting and working with. And so I thought if there was a chance to give like a peek behind or show a little bit more personality than just like, here's what we have, bye, that just seemed like a better idea. And to be frank, we could post all day long. We have X for sale, and it didn't really improve the sales of that. Like maybe more people would ask, but it wasn't like a super linear translation. Sure. So I started doing these longer posts and they started connecting. And then like I'd be going to farmers market, which was how we sold everything at the time except for wholesale. And I would have so many people be like, who writes your posts? Like I just wake up and read this. And I was like, shit, okay, this is like pressure now. So, but it was also like a feedback loop that like, it kind of like reinforced itself. And then I'd want to get edgier with things and like, and be like, whoa, and like we do a little bit of that. And so last year was interesting. COVID was interesting. Black Lives Matter. A lot of these things were interesting. And we are in a very, we're in a very conservative, small town, rural area. I don't want to paint this as like a different place. I mean, we have some pockets of difference. We have we're not multicultural by any stretch. I mean, we are just a very sort of vanilla northern community. And so, but I started being a lot more involved in the community and I started hearing, like, I started learning, like people wished there was more like momentum. And I mean, this is maybe like a little bit too deep, but like we had been toying with like the idea of me running for office and we weren't sure what that office would be. And we were just stuck on like, would it be a net positive or net negative for the business? And would it be a net positive or net negative for our family? No matter what it could do for the community, like how would it affect our business and our family? And we both just kind of concluded it wasn't the right fit at the time. And so we doubled down on community involvement. So like I joined the board of directors of our Chamber of Commerce. My wife joined the board of directors of the arts organization in town. I got onto a zoning board. Now I'm on the planning commission. We got on the farm conference planning commission. So we really dug into like getting involved in these board level private engagements. And through that learned a lot more about the community. And I felt like that background information of like what's really happening and what business owners are thinking and what they're hearing and stuff, that really helped me find my voice with what I thought I could say and get away with and what I couldn't get away with. And, it's just really helped. And I think it's made some people feel like, I mean, we've had people say things, this is like really crazy. Like we've had people say things on our annual end of year survey, like they were planning to move away and then they didn't when we set up shop here. Wow. Like that's so heavy and like beautiful. And like our whole thing is like, we just want to build a world that we want to inhabit. So like the idea that people changed where they lived or they had to move away. And the saddest part was that we weren't going with them, like these really like profound things, that really resonated with us. And so we really wanted to keep that going. But yeah, daylight saving time. I sometimes, so if somebody's thinking about like how to post, I sometimes think of a post like, I've never been in the radio industry, but if you listen, I used to listen to the radio all the time, commuting to work and to school and stuff. DJs in the morning show DJs are like the kings and queens of talking about nothing, but with really strong opinions. Like daylight saving time is the perfect example. No one's going to get hurt which side you take, but everyone has an opinion and it gets people all riled up and they're like all having these thoughts and like, yeah, I've always wanted that too, you know? And so sometimes I've tried to think of myself like, okay, how would a DJ, like a morning DJ, like launch this conversation? Like what kind of like fake inflammatory thing can I say that'll like stir people up, but it's like a non-issue? And so that's helped like get engagement. And I don't know, I think that sometimes that's fun. I don't do a whole lot of that, but my desire, our desire is to help people see how much goes into, we're not just dirt farmers. There's a lot more going into this food and you can support a lot more by just buying this food.
Yeah, I think that marketing in general with this kind of business is super important just to get the customers connected. And I think you do a great job. I just want to talk about that a little bit and see where you're in, because I feel like that's been very intentional. I think that's a lot of what I admire about what you guys are doing is it's very intentional, very thoughtful in terms of your business strategy, plan, customer relationships. We could talk about all these things, but we got to get to some questions, Brian. It's gonna be like 2 hours and we're not going to take any questions. So there's a interactive element here. So let's get a couple questions. These are from the Patreon questions here. So if you guys aren't Patreon members, go check it out. It's as little as $2 a month. Support all of our work, all the stuff we got going on, and then you get to ask questions, and Brian will answer them. So here are the Patreon questions. Zach Selby, can Brian talk about lavender production from propagation, how he overwinters it, how many years plants are in the ground, and how to find a good processor for value-added product and pricing? There's a lot of information, but just talk about lavender, I guess.
Yeah, okay. I can't help on the last part. I don't know.
Okay.
Value-added processor, we sell everything, we grow. And to be frank, you'd have to be growing a lot before I think your value-added processor is like the thing holding you back. That's my own opinion. Commercial scale lavender is like a whole nother animal. And if you don't believe me, Google it. But like Google it in France. I think, yeah, so we grow lavender. We're in a cold area. We planted 4 varieties to start. We watched how they overwintered. 2 were meh, 2 were okay. 1 was excellent. One of those 2 was excellent. That variety is called Hidcoat. We switched all of our plantings to Hidcoat. And so we only grow 1 variety. It's called Hidcoat. It's culinary lavender. Okay, probably year 3, you're at pretty close to full production. You know, year 3, you're getting a good chunk. Year 4, it's probably full size for sure. Overwintering's pretty solid. Everything is planted in the woven ground cover, or sometimes just called weed mat. Everything's planted in weed mat. So we're planting that in the ground. We just try to get the ground pretty smooth. Like maybe we till it or something. Somehow we try to get it smooth. Sometimes I've just like scraped it with the bucket of a tractor, but we just try to get pretty flat ground. Staple the weed mat down. Sometimes we'll throw compost, but not really. Lavender doesn't need much. And then we used to cut holes. Now we burn because it doesn't fray, which is nice. So we burn the holes, plant the lavender. We get all our lavender as plugs. There's not really seeds to speak of. So it's all vegetatively propagated. We're not great at it. So you can get tons of vegetatively propagated lavender from Washington State, has the most of it. And then for some like better pricing or certified organic, Hillcrest is a nursery in Maryland that's pretty good to work with. But if you Googled like, you want like liner trays of lavender, like plug trays. You don't want like individual pots. So you can get like a 105 tray of lavender for like $50 and just get those in the ground. And they don't all make it, but it's cheap. It's better than buying bigger plants and spending way more money, right? So that's kind of the deal. Then we cut them back in the fall, just everything that's not woody, with just like a hedge trimmer, like a, type thing. And then, is that it? Did I cover it? What else do you do?
How many years are plants in the ground?
Well, I haven't hit the end yet. So
Okay.
at least 7. We actually have a pretty big lavender farm in our like one community over, and their former farm manager of several years is now an employee of ours. And so I've kind of bounced lavender questions off to her. She knows like everything about lavender, and that's kind of what inspired us to start doing like distilling it. So we have like lavender hydrosol and lavender essential oil that we're making with the lavender now. And so that was a leap I was willing to take because she had some background in that, and we started doing that with lots of herbs actually. And then one fun thing with all of our perennial herbs that I like mentioning is we're in a northern area, so our hoop houses are pretty far apart to account for snow in the winter. So we have 30-foot hoop house, 30-foot gap, 30-foot hoop house, 30-foot gap. So with a row of 6 hoop houses, you know, it's like the equivalent of 11 because you have 5 gaps of 30. And so I hated seeing that space be wasted. So we take 10-foot weed mat down either side. So in that 30-foot gap, there's 10-foot weed mat right on the baseboard of one hoop house and right on the baseboard of the other, and then a 10-foot alley. So we can drive down that alley. We put clover in there. We can mow it. So we can drive down that alley, but then you get a 10-foot block of perennial herbs or lavender and a 10-foot block of perennial herbs or lavender. And so that's how we grow our thyme, mint, sage, tarragon. All those things are grown in those blocks. And then you have the benefit of keeping your baseboard clean, which we had issues with weeds getting like tangled in the roll-up sides and stuff like that. So it helps keep it clean. So that's where we grow. We don't have like a lavender field. All of our lavender is in these little 10-foot by 140-foot blocks just on the south side of every hoop house.
Cool. Okay. Next question from Jamie Ford. My favorite local farmer. I'd love to hear more about growing garlic without mulch. I think you kind of answered that already. How does it stay weed-free in early spring? I'd also like to know how Brian and Ann stay so connected with their community as an on-premise market versus farm market vendor. What challenges and value has this new avenue of selling brought? So I guess maybe talk a little bit about that transition. And
yeah, okay, I'll break that into chunks. The garlic,
okay.
The only piece of garlic I didn't touch. We don't use mulch. I am not morally opposed to mulch. We just don't have a very reliable source or way of applying like weed-free straw. So that it's just a supply and mechanics issue. I think there's a time in the future where we may use mulch, but right now it's not in the cards. John Hendrickson at Small Farm Works in Wisconsin, he brought the paper pot planter to the United States. Thank you, John. He gave me the idea for no mulch. I was like moaning to him at a conference one time about like, oh, but like, what do you do? And he was just like, dude, I don't mulch it. You're north like me. We get enough snow. I just don't mulch it. I was like, what do you mean you don't mulch it? He's like, there's a lot of us that don't mulch it. I was like, what? So I was like, okay, I'll try it. And it's super cool. There's different reasons people mulch. And in areas without reliable snow cover, I can definitely see a compelling reason to mulch. We have a lot of snow. But here's the cool part. In the early spring and in the rest of the season, when we don't have mulch, that means we can cultivate. So when you don't have straw in between your garlics, you can take a wheel hoe in between those garlics. You can take a stirrup hoe right down those aisles, down those sides of those beds, whatever you want. And so that for us has been really helpful because mulch will stop some weeds, but not all. But if you can cultivate, you can get in there more frequently. The trick is in the spring, that crust is really hard. Like that winter soil crust is really hard. So like we don't touch it. Like we hold off as long as humanly possible until we start seeing some stuff, and then we'll cultivate. And unfortunately, once you start cultivating, it kind of like softens up the soil. But that's our angle. It's a fair amount of hand cultivation, but it's not terrible. Market or role in the community. I touched on that a little bit. We kind of had this decision to get involved with like boards and committees and things, and they're not farm related, but a lot of these boards, for farmers listening, a lot of these boards try to capture different segments of the economy in their representation on a board of directors. And rarely are they getting people from agriculture or food. You know, there's plenty of bankers and finance and, you know, real estate. All those people are always looking for these service organizations, but there's not so often people from agriculture or food. So they're usually happy to have somebody with that background on their board off that perspective. And then you find that you learn a lot about a community. So that's been really helpful. We've made great professional relationships that way. We've learned a lot about what's going on. And like, what businesses are doing what. You just kind of learn a lot more. So that's been really helpful for getting involved. Yeah, last year we switched from farmers markets to on-farm market. Yep, that was a big deal. I had done farmers markets for basically 52 weeks straight for 6 years straight, and 2 days a week, Friday, Saturday, and it was exhausting. I was burnt out, but I didn't know how to get off the wheel, like the hamster wheel. I mean, I just was. What do you do, man? You just got to keep going. And the customers just, you miss 1 week and you feel so bad, and that was really hard. So COVID brought that silver lining for us where we just thought, you know what, we want to be in control. We weren't sure what was going to happen. And we thought if we sold stuff on our farm, at least we're in control. We can make it how we want it. We can do what we want and be in control. And I always saying, I mean, I have 10 greenhouses at this point, but I'm always saying control the controllables. So on the farm, control the controllables, tons of things you can't control. Business, control the controllables, tons of things you won't be able to. And so this was a case of like control the controllables. And so we turned a storage barn into an on-farm market, and it was a home run. I mean, our goal was to recoup 50% of the year before's farmers market revenue. Okay, so the year before was like, let's say 100,000. We were hoping to get 50 and like, eke out of that year and then go back to markets. That was the plan. And we did like 140. It was like wild. It was so cool. And people were
It was a huge demand this year as well.
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah. And we just found that people wanted, we spent a lot of years keeping people off our farm except for plant sale. And so people really wanted to be able to come see us and buy stuff and support and whatever. And so that was the highlight of, other than our daughter being born, that was the highlight of 2020.
People wanted to know who the person doing the Instagram posts are. That's why they were coming by. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think that there was a lot of that last year, a lot of pivots. I don't know if you know David Williams of Sunset Market Gardens. He's in North Carolina. He did a similar thing where he had a farm store. He was doing part-time at the farmer's market for sales, and he went full on, and now he's having a blast with it and doing really well. So I think there's people like coming to the farm if you have a little bit of a customer base already.
Yeah, that's what I said to people. Like, if this was year zero, it would be very hard. Like, we took an existing customer base and said, instead of coming here, come here. If we just were screaming, yelling into the void, hey, we're this thing, and also come find us, that's a tougher row to hoe for marketing. But we did see some unexpected perks. For those that do markets and are maybe on the fence, we had done full enterprise budgets of our cost of going to market in 2019. And we realized we were at market for 8 hours a week. We could be open on the farm for 32 hours in a week. That's how many hours a customer could come shop. And it took us 2 less man hours to be open for 32 hours on the farm than to go to farmer's market for 8 hours. That was some profound math because that made us more accessible to customers, but also freed up a bunch of personnel on the farm. Because, of course, farmer's market was no longer one person. It was 2-3 people leaving the farm and then this skeleton crew back at the farm. And so that helped smooth things out that way. And we had a lot less waste because everything was in refrigerators. And at market, with greens and microgreens, that stuff was kind of like just toast in the bag by the end of a hot day. And here it was just as good. So the reduction in shrink and better use of labor made it a real win-win on our operational end.
Okay. And you had a great conversation with Claire about this on the podcast. I'd recommend if you guys want to hear more about this, you go check that out. You guys went kind of in depth about that. But one more thing to point out about this, and I've heard this from David as well, is that the average sale went up significantly.
Way up. Our average, I have all these metrics, which it doesn't surprise my wife or anybody else, but our average at our markets ranged in 2019, it was between $7 and $9.75 per market transaction. And we have a digital point of sale, so we track all this. So it was between $7 and $9.75. And right when we opened the on-farm market, it was about 28 per. And by the end of the year, it was about 40 to 45 per transaction. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. But by and large, our customer counts were down by 75%. Okay? So we would get like 400 or 500 people in a 4-hour market. And then in a whole day on the farm, like 50 people maybe would be like that'd be a busy day. But when those 50 people spend the same as, four people and you do it for 4 days, then it magnifies. So yeah, you lose a lot of the like one cucumber, one tomato customers, but your core following comes and they buy even more.
Yeah, and you don't have to set up and bring stuff back and forth and all that stuff. All right, last question from Jamie here. Further education. What kind of mentors and education do they seek out during the year?
During the year, yeah, I mean, Well, we have very deliberately not sought business advice from other farmers. That's no disrespect to farmers. That's just that we've been very conscious that we're running a business that happens to be a farm. We're not running a farm we hope becomes a business. So we've worked a lot with SCORE, which most communities have a chapter of SCORE. It's like, I don't know, it's an acronym, but it's retired executives, retired management, not even always retired, but it's people with a lot of experience who offer free confidential business counseling to businesses in your community. And they usually pair you up with 2 people and you meet with them as frequently or infrequently as you like. So we've done sorted through a lot of like labor and payroll and like, how do we handle cash flow? We've done a lot of that with our SCORE mentors. And then we have our extension has a business counselor who we've worked with a lot. And no joke, man, we watch The Profit and we listen to How I Built This, that podcast. How I Built This is a podcast with Guy Raz. Highly recommend it. Every time I'm doing deliveries, it's How I Built This. And then we watch The Profit. Like, we've never missed an episode. And those 2 things just really get the wheels turning about like what we need to do to make our business better.
You got to get on that show.
Oh yeah, my wife. Yeah. That's another conversation. But yes.
All right. Let's move on here, Brian. Jody Miller says, "I'm interested in your custom compost blend from Morgan Composting. Have you seen any issues with high levels of potassium or phosphorus in your compost? And if so, how do you mitigate these excesses?"
Yeah. Okay, to the excesses, never seen anything excess on potassium. We're routinely trying to get that boosted up. So I've never seen an issue with that.
Phosphorus?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a manure-based compost. So I feel like that just comes with the territory of manure-based compost, especially dairy manure. You're going to have higher phosphorus. Man, I mean, for the soil nerds in the house, like excess phosphorus is a really interesting rabbit hole of like, is it or isn't it like, bad and for whom, like for the crop, for the waterway, for the farmer, for the plant, like there's a lot of things.
Is it leaching? Is it not leaching?
Right. Yeah. Right. And is it tying something else up? I mean, like these are hard to answer questions. So phosphorus, right, we keep an eye on kind of just like, cause it seems like it's the best practice. Potassium, we've never seen an excess of.
Okay.
Woodland composting. What can I say? They are great. They're a great family. We've gotten to know them really well over the years. We get a ton from them, well, many tons. But the custom blend, way that works is we get a soil test. We send them all to Waypoint Analytical. We really like Waypoint. Good speed, and accurate and very consistent. Anyhow, we can send them a soil test. Send Waypoint the soil test or tissue test. We do tissue testing with them in the summer on like tomatoes and things. We send them the test, get the results. We can send those results to an agronomist at Morgan's or through our farmer co-op has an agronomist that blends Morgan's products. And then we can just say like, okay, here's the soil test for Hoop House 1, Hoop House 3, Hoop House 4, Hoop House 5, Hoop House 7, South Field, West Field, East Field, North Field. And then here's what we're going to grow in each of those locations. And here's the plant density. And here's something we're a little concerned about. Like last year, the yields tapered by August or whatever. And then they can make a blend for each house and for each field. And sometimes if they're all similar enough, like 3 fields are the same maybe, then we'll get a bulk load instead of a tote. And then we'll just spread it. And so like this year we did that, even the hoop houses, basically we made a bulk base. So, and we were concerned about phosphorus and just not using more than we needed to. So we used leaf mold compost and peat moss and a little bit of dairy dew. And we put a ton in, like the most I've ever done, like 12 yards per hoop house. I've never done anything like that in my farming career. I think the crew wanted to kill me, But it was pretty light because it was mostly peat moss. But we're really trying to boost that organic matter just so it would have better water retention. And we have very sandy soil. Here's the deal. That base came on a bulk dump truck. So we got 70 yards of that dumped on the farm. Then we put that in all the houses to boost the organic matter. But then for the individual nutrients, your nitrogen, phosphorus, or nitrogen, potassium, minerals, etc., that we can get as granular and just put in per house. So all the houses got the same base treatment. And then like tomato house number 1 got 50 pounds of this, 20 pounds of that. Tomato house number 2, 80 pounds of this, 30 pounds of that. You know, you can dial it in. And that way we're doing like the bulk application of like our base, and then we're customizing those high impact, you know, nutrients as we go.
Okay. And then the follow-up question here is about cost. Also interested in your approach to cost, how much you expect to spend on 90,000 pounds of annual compost. I don't even know if that's your number, but
90,000 pounds of annual compost. I don't know if that's my number. I did post on Instagram and Facebook how many yards we'd gotten, and promptly had our truck driver pulled over by the county road commission for frost restrictions, saying that somebody saw on Facebook and called the county that we were getting heavy loads when they weren't supposed to be delivering heavy loads in the winter. And man, was that a misunderstanding of small town. People need other things to do than call the road commission on my farm about my farm. But they saw online that we were selling it, and they thought what was getting delivered we were selling, which the only way you can take a heavy truck during frost restrictions is if it's for farm use, and it was for farm use, but like we sell it and we use it, and this load we used, and it was just real kerfuffle. But how much do we spend? I have no idea. I have found that in the hoop houses, you would really, I mean, the value of that crop is so high that the inputs rarely register. Like labor is a much bigger concern for me than those inputs. I don't have my numbers in front of me, like those kind of numbers, but I would say this year fertilizer and compost will probably spend between like off the cuff between 20 and 30 grand is my guess. Yeah. And that's high. I've self-proclaimed this the year of organic matter at Bear Creek. So we're higher. I think last year we were in like the 15 to 18 neighborhood. But those numbers are meaningless. Like, do what you need for your crop. If 30 grand in amendments gets me $600,000 in crops, that's a pretty good deal. Like, I'm not going to lose any sleep over that. Labor for those same amount of crops is like 300,000. So I'm going to spend a lot more time making sure we're efficient than I am nickel and diming the amendments.
Is this part of Own the Spring?
Say it again.
Is this part of Own the Spring?
Which part of it?
The year of organic compost. Is
no, not so much. Not so much. I think it's just that at the end of last year, we took stock of what we were doing and everything that we do. And I just kind of I have two different approaches for enterprises. One is what's working and how can we pour fuel on the fire, right? Like what's going well and how can we easily just do more of it? That's a great thing to do. I love doing that. And then what kind of things are maybe like not working as well as I'd like, and which of those is worth trying to fix? And which of those is like, maybe we just drop that. And so worth trying to fix was I've long wished to be able to put more organic matter down than we've taken the time to do. And I felt like I saw a window of opportunity this year. We had a very experienced returning crew. Everybody except for 2 people on our crew this year has been here already. And so I felt like, okay, I'm not going to have myself tied up doing a lot of training this spring. So this might be a good opportunity to just like unleash everybody to like just spread all this organic matter and like knock it out. So it just kind of felt like a good window to get this base built.
Okay. And I think I say this a lot, like in my own content, that you got to invest in your soil like that. If you're going to invest in something, like that's a great place to spend money. And people think about, oh, this bill for compost is $2,000 or whatever. And you look at the grand picture of your business and how much you get out of that. And it's like, even me and my small farm, if I put down like, the deep compost system, I put down like 2 yards on a bed. It's like, man, even if I spend $60 on that, like the first crop pays for that, like immediately.
Yeah. And yeah. I agree, and I think that the piece that we get caught up on, and like I am sometimes accused of being a little too focused on efficiency, but for me, it's not like just green revolution, fence row to fence row. It's like, how can I best maximize these resources? How can I optimize my time? I mentioned that, I mentioned that we've got, like, we use Score for things, but like this year I got myself like a therapist / performance coach. And like, that's to help me be a better version of me. I don't want me to be the bottleneck. So how can I make a better version of myself so that I can unleash the potential of everybody else around me? So that's like been one goal, and it's hard to help everyone else if I'm not taking care of me. So that's been one like interesting kind of investment. But that's also why I got rid of beds and aisles and walkways. That's why we plant so densely together. Because if you cover a field in 30 yards of compost, and then you promptly put 30 to 40% of that field in wheelways and aisles, to me, that's a bad investment. And so I'd rather take the same amount of compost and pack those crops in there. Same amount of sprinkler heads, pack the crops in there. Water pressure, all these limited resources like sprinklers, water pressure, amendments, labor time, hoop house dimensions, like all these things that are limited. Well, what if we put it a little closer together? We now plant twice as much in each hoop house of greens as what we used to plant. Nothing changed about the hoop house. We just changed how we plant it. And so every ounce of water and dollar of amendments that we spend on that hoop house, every dollar of depreciation on that hoop house is now spread across more product, which is really helpful.
Very cool. I know, like with the mark gardening trend over the last few decades, the idea has been intensively growing on 30-inch beds, for example. And the idea was like, let's cram as much as we can in. And I see a lot more people, including Jesse, is now widening beds, like less walkways, more growing space. And so you went full on. Like, we're just gonna. All right. So with that in mind, let's get to some questions. This is for my man Gene here. He says, "How do you harvest the Pac-Man tunnel?" We were talking about this. Gene was over at my place today. And we were talking about this. Like, what is it? Just hand harvesting, or is there any mechanization to?
Well, all hand.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a regular $3 lettuce knife from whatever wholesale lettuce knife catalog. Whatever. Like, it's just it's not even a California head lettuce knife. It's just a small rectangular. I can go grab one in the wash back, but it's just a lettuce knife. And we hold with one, chop with the other, and off you go. It's not that slow. You learn quick not to cut yourself. And what was I going to say? Okay, so I would like to quick cut harvest some things, but we have had issues with the paper pot planter getting an even enough soil profile. So I did buy a cultipacker this year, a new one, not a used old school one. I bought a new one, and it's going to pack. We were just testing this out last week. So we're going to try and pack the field after it's dissed, pack the field and get those grooves with the cultipacker tracks, and then use those grooves to keep our lines straight. But then also that should keep a flat base across the field. So we might be able to quick cut something that way. So we're trying some cultipacker for bed prep. And then we got one of those mesh bed rollers you put cinder blocks on or whatever. And so after we even just earthway seeded spinach this spring in the tunnel, you have these little furrows, and it's not the end of the world until you want to go harvest it with a quick cut harvester. And then you're like, well, shoot, it's all full of soil and stuff. So we then seeded that and went over it 4 times with that barrel roller thing. And now it's super flat. So you get benefit of a bed, but without having to give up the spacing.
All right. So I got a question about if you guys, I think you describe a Pac-Man as that's just just plant the whole area out, but
yeah.
So my question is with harvesting, what season are you growing this in? Because to me, I'm thinking, all right, a whole greenhouse, 30 by whatever you said, 130 or 140, whatever it was. That's not, you need all of that in 1 week, or do you have trouble with stuff stretching out before it's ready, or do you not plant it all at once, or how does that work?
Okay,
in terms of
great question. Yeah, great question. So first of all, Pac-Man method, that term I coined to refer to how we harvest. everyone says, where are the walkways? Where do I go? There's nowhere to go. Do you float? Do you hover? Like, how do I get in there? And that's where I'm like, no, like you just munch your way through. Like we just harvest our way through. Like you don't need to get in there. You just wait and just harvest it when you need it. And so if you really, for some reason, are jonesing to get through there, then you could go munch your way down the middle and give yourself a middle aisle. And we've done that in random times for different reasons. But the idea is that you're just munching your way through. You're just harvesting it as you go. So that's where the term came from. I also could think of it as like a typewriter. You're like going side to side and like marching down. Why do we do that? One reason is it's pretty efficient. It's pretty, you're minimizing the trips. You're not walking back and forth. This is predominantly in the fall. Okay. So fall into winter.
Okay. That's what I was wondering about.
Is we have supplemental heat. And so we have a hanging piece of poly that we clamp on to the bows in the hoop house. And so we actually Pac-Man from the opposite side, from the far side coming up. So this would be a case where we would do a middle row down to get our way down, and then Pac-Man coming up. And so then as we finish a chunk, we move that poly behind us. So like the house is 30 by 144, but as it gets colder and colder, we're heating like 96, 72, 48, turn it off. And so that way, as you get deeper into fall and winter, you're heating less and less. So you kind of, you wouldn't want to heat the whole house for the least amount of greens. That's ridiculous. So,
right. So I guess my question was about harvesting, because like I think like if it's growing quickly, like do you need a whole Pac-Man tunnel at once? You know what I mean?
We didn't used to need that much at once. So we would do maybe like half the tunnel Pac-Man lettuce, half the tunnel spinach. But now we sell a ton of lettuce. So each tunnel in the fall, we're just stockpiling tunnels. So they're all planted over the same 2-week span in like September, but then they're all harvested from like end of October to mid-December. So each tunnel lasts about 2 weeks. So it's yeah, we sell a lot. I mean, we sell like 500 pounds of lettuce a week. So the whole tunnel is harvested within 2 weeks tops.
Okay. That was my question. I was like, man, that's a lot of lettuce. If there's like a couple of hot weeks or something, like, the lettuce in the back is going to get huge.
Yep. And also some issues with mildew because it is super densely packed. So you can get mildew issues. And if we see a tunnel drifting that direction, we will prioritize harvesting that one first and just get that one taken care of.
Okay. All right, cool. Let's get another question here. Jeffrey Fortner, have you ever grown elephant garlic, and do you have a recommendation for garlic that will take the heat that we have down in the South?
We grew elephant garlic once. It did not do well at all. It's very hard to find. I know it's technically a leek and stuff. We don't grow it. I don't know anything about garlic in the South. I've heard you guys have to put your garlic in like a fridge or freezer to like trick it that it's spring, but that's the extent of my knowledge on how it works. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. Here's a question from Zach Goldenberg. Did you have funding prior to starting the farm?
No, everybody loves that, thinks that. No, not really. I mean, I'm an open book about how this has gone down, but basically we had this homestead ambition and this desire for land. So we did borrow money to buy the land, and then we did FSA loans to the initial like greenhouse tractor, things like that. So we borrowed money for the land. Our own money savings went to build our pole barn. We live in our wash pack, in case people don't know that. Like, we thought we were going to build 2 buildings and got quotes, and we're like, holy shit, nope, 1 building, we'll live inside. So we live inside this one barn. The barn I'm in right now is my office, wash pack, wet room, walk-in cooler, break room. It's all of it, and it's our house. So that was a pretty good investment. Pole barn was pretty effective for us. So it's a 40 by 60. We live in a 20 by 40 chunk of it. The front third has 2 floors, and the rest of it's just wash back space. So land mortgage, built the house, capitalized with FSA loan funds, microloan first, then they expanded it, microloan again, and then different loans here and there from different sources. And then we did do, like, a couple years ago, and like NRCS has like the hoop house program, and Michigan had some cool hoop house programs. So we got a lot of our hoop houses that way. And then 2 years ago, we did do a big $500,000 expansion. And that was a $400,000 loan from FSA. and then a $20,000 business match, and then an $80,000 state grant as part of this like economic investment. So that was a $500,000 project that we are definitely reaping the rewards from right now. I have no regrets about that.
All right. Marketing question from Bethany Walker. How do you efficiently find outlets for your products? For instance, your lavender stuff.
Efficiently finding sales outlets. That's like an oxymoron, right? Like it's just so hard to efficiently find sales outlets. We take a real like anchor, what do you want to call this? Like anchor customer approach. So in our town, we have like 2 anchor customers, one on like the middle of town and one on the north side of town. And so like we just built a really strong relationship with them. And then as we deliver to those areas, we might reach out to some like nearby restaurants or stores and sell to them too. And then we branch into another town further away, like an hour and a half away. It's the furthest we go. Landed one big anchor, customer, and we wouldn't have reached out to anybody else until we knew we had them locked up. But then once we had them locked up, then it's like, okay, call these 3, 4, 5 places and see if we can round out that trip. But 90% of our sales are within 12 miles of where I'm sitting. That one trip to that town is the only thing, that and some online mail orders are the only things that are not sold like right where we are. But yeah, I would say like when you're trying to market the stuff and like it's like so chicken and the egg, right? They're gonna want consistency and like everything, and like you're trying to see if there's demand for it, and it's really hard. What helped me a lot was I actually got a job at the store that I thought was eventually going to be our biggest customer. So that was very conscious of me. I got a job just stocking the shelves because I wanted to learn how that store worked, so that as we built our business, I would be able to speak store to them. Okay. I mean, like,
wow, man, that's deep. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's not the fastest way. It's not efficient. I parked a chunk of my life at that store, but
it's effective though.
Yeah, it is. And what I learned a lot of things about how a lot of stores work. And I learned about how stores talk and how buyers think and how customers shop and like what they care about. And so that really narrowed our focus. And so that's not an efficient answer, but I think ask for the buyer and like find stores that sell similar products. If they don't sell a product like yours probably isn't going to be the first. I hate to say that, but like,
yeah. I know for me, like I'm only selling to restaurants. And so I have experience I was a professional brewer for 5 years, and a bunch of those years I brewed in brew pubs. So I was constantly working with the chefs. I was in the kitchen every day, hanging out with them, they were making me food and stuff and chatting about, I'm just trying to learn everything. And now I'm like, I walk in the back of a kitchen and I'm very comfortable in there. Like, I don't feel awkward. Yeah. Like, and I've never worked as a professional chef, but like they can be very intimidating. And I'm sure it is when you're approaching retail stores and stuff like that.
For sure. I've never been a grocery buyer. I was a stocker and then I was a receiving manager, but I'd never been a buyer. But yeah, when I walk in the back of a grocery store, I know what I'm looking at. I'm very familiar. And you hear that all the time with people who worked in food, selling to food service, and people who had other, so you sell where you're comfortable. But I agree completely. I just tell people, like, if you go into a store and there's no local products on the shelf, you're probably not going to be the first. If you go to a restaurant and there's no local products on the menu, you're probably not going to be the first. Doesn't mean you can't be, but if you're looking for that initial account, you're probably going to want to work with a partner who's accustomed to working with people like you. So that would be what I'd say.
Yeah, and I think the sort of old school consistency in networking, I think, like if you're consistent with a customer for a while and you're doing well with them, like it'll happen. Like,
yep.
Someone talks to someone and then, hey, you get your shot and just be ready to take care of that new customer.
Cut your teeth on the forgiving customer. Like, cut your teeth on that early adopter. Learn what it's like to invoice and bill and box and deliver and schedule that, and like see if that's a good fit for you, and then grow from there.
Cool. All right, Brian, I think we could talk for probably 3-4 hours. But let me give you one other question here, unless we have some other questions. It looks like we've gone through most of them here. What are some things that you're excited about in the farming space? Like things that, sort of, it sounds like a lot of the business strategies and stuff is kind of what you like to nerd out on the most, but You know, like what's exciting you right now? Like, what are you looking forward to this year and next year?
Good question. Very excited about my cultipacker. It's a
Okay.
cool thing. It's like an old school farm thing, but we're like dreaming up ways that it can improve systems. It's just like such a simple thing. So I'm really geeked on that right now. Um, we are grafting our first tomatoes this year. We've talked about it
Okay.
for 3 or 4 years. We're finally making it happen. Again, this is like me knowing we've got some experienced people, and I don't know how long they're going to be around, but like if there's a time to try, now's the time. So we're trying that. Maybe like 40% success in the first round, so not horrible. So that's been pretty interesting. Kind of cool to watch that happen. This is a random one, but we tend to avoid crops that draw a lot of pests out of fear of dealing with those pests. But I'm trying to like lean into that a little bit and maybe see like what it's like to tackle that. Aphids being a big concern of ours. So we actually like have been talking to some bigger greenhouse companies and stuff. And so we bought a fogger, which like sounds really bad and chemically, but it's really quite simple and interesting. And so instead of like taking a backpack sprayer or whatever, like out into fields or rows, like in the greenhouses and hoop houses, we got this fogger that like you set it on a timer and connect it to an air compressor, and then like it'll like aerosolize your spray, whatever it is, whatever. We're certified organic, so it's some benign type spray, but like it aerosolizes it so that it'll like fog like every side of the leaf and the you know what I'm saying. It's like we always had a trouble with like mildews and aphids, like they're on the underside and like they're very hard to get to. And so this has been an interesting little project. We're kind of like trying to like, not be quite so reactive to some of this stuff. And so this fogger is kind of like a new tool in our tool belt that we're trying to test out. So I would say that's probably another interesting piece. And then I'm just trying to push the limits of what people say we can and cannot do. So we're like expanding our garlic production, but we're trying to plant it closer and closer together. And like at what point does the yield actually go down? We kind of realized we were planting our garlic further away than onions. I'm like, that's kind of weird because onions are way bigger than garlic. So like, why are we doing that? So we added a whole nother row per bed. We made them closer together. So we're kind of like trying to get better with that. Yeah, I would say those are kind of the main things, and just fixing a lot of things that I've kept telling myself we didn't have time to fix. So like I can turn on the irrigation with my phone now. It's not perfect. It's not on a schedule, but at least I can do it with my phone. So happy about that. And we have automatic roll-up sides, but they never do what we want. So we cut all the cords to every automatic side, and we put a little automotive connector thing. This was an idea from a neighbor of ours between each cord, so that in the spring or the winter when it gets really hot in there, but there's so much snow that they would break if they tried to go up, we can just take it out. And so it can be automatic when we want it, but then like analog when we don't. So like little bitty things like that are bringing me a lot of pleasure these days.
It's all about those little things.
Yeah.
What was it? We called up, I did a video. I know you're probably not watching my ridiculous vlogs and stuff, Brian, but there was one I talked about like farm luxuries, almost like, like I kind of challenged everyone to like take a few minutes on your farm this winter and try to fix some of those little annoyances, like those connectors you're talking about. Or like for me, it was like the stairs going into my shed, like didn't have stairs, and now it has stairs. It's very nice every time. So farm luxuries, there you go.
Yeah. I think that's been good. The other weird piece, and this has come out of like my like performance coach therapist person and like trying to make my life better, is I usually use this calendar has been like my go-to calendar, but as I've gotten busier, it's not keeping up. And so this last weekend, my wife and I digitized our calendar. I'm actually like blocking out time for making an email, time for replying to emails and phone calls, time for contacting buyers, time for harvesting. So like I'm trying to like be more organized with my time, because it starts to feel like I could just walk around putting out fires all day, and then at the end of the day I was busy but I got nothing done, right? And I hated that feeling. And so now I'm trying to approach the day with more intention. It's interesting.
It's really cool. I know as your business gets more complicated, you have to sort of learn how to run that as well and be efficient. So anything else you want to add to the conversation that, that just came up while we were talking, or anything you have coming up that you want to talk about in general?
No, I just think I want to encourage people to always like think about what works best for them. A lot of our greatest successes have come from answering to ourselves and our customers, and not what we saw somebody else doing or what we feel like we ought to be doing. And I've found that to be somewhat empowering, and it makes the victories feel better, and it makes the failures feel like you learned something. If you're copying somebody and it doesn't work, you maybe don't have the full understanding of why it didn't work. But like if you kind of did it from the ground up, then you feel a little more autonomy to kind of tweak that. So I really have found that like the more I talk to other growers, a lot of us, I mean myself included, but a lot of us get in this rut of like, it has to be this way. Like it has to be a 30-inch bed, or it has to be a 5-inch salad, a 5-ounce bag of salad, or whatever, an 8-carat bun. I mean, whatever it is, like we just kind of like get stuck thinking that it has to be that way, or somebody's is better than ours. And it's, sometimes it's not always that way. And I think that doing that journey for yourself can make a big difference. So that's one thing that I found to be really cool. The other thing that I feel like we've drawn a lot of success from is surveying our customers and our staff. And if you don't have staff, then like your volunteers or people that are like involved with your business. We also survey our wholesale buyers, but make it super anonymous, invite them to be like super honest, and just find out what people are thinking about. Because lots of times the things in our world that we want to change, people don't even like, they don't care about. They don't know that that's even an issue. They just, they don't care that you have some pest issue in that field in the back corner that you just can't seem to solve. They just wish your bag was easier to open, right? I mean, like sometimes it's such little things. And so you can never find that answer unless you ask. And if you're afraid of that answer, then you should definitely ask, right? But I think that that's the part that we've found really, really empowering. By and large, the feedback is really positive, and that ends up feeling good. But if you notice some patterns, you can change those things. And I feel like the more you tweak early, the bigger you get, the more you know you're on the right track. You don't want to get big and then wake up one day and be like, what are we even doing? So I feel the most confident now ever that we're delivering what we should be, how we should be, to whom we should be, for the price that we should be. And at the beginning, it felt like we were guessing, and it's just been this iterative process and soliciting feedback. And I think that's been really helpful. So I would say, yeah, those two pieces to me are just like, I hate that so much of what I'm saying has nothing to do with like actually soil-based farming, but I just feel like these little things allow you, I've said it so many times before, like I have my dream job. Doing these things lets me keep that job. And so I just feel really passionate about those types of things.
Absolutely, Brian. Well, very well said. And I think you have to have a business if you want to continue having a farm. So all this stuff is super important. Brian, thanks again so much for coming on tonight. I really enjoyed having you here. Maybe we'll do it again sometime. But thanks again for spending the evening with us.
Thanks for having me. This was super cool.
All right. All right. Well, as I said, big thanks to Brian. Very interesting person. Brings a ton of awesome information to the community. And I really have enjoyed chatting with him and getting to know him a little bit. And hopefully you enjoyed this too. And if you're just tuning in now, late to the party here, this video will be up on YouTube. You can go back and check it out, and also available as an audio form in a podcast. So go look up Growers Live in any of your podcast apps or wherever you listen to it, and check out the new podcast from No-Till Growers. Again, go check out the Patreon page, help support our work, and I really appreciate your time here this evening. We'll be back in 2 weeks with Jenny Quiner of Dog Patch Urban Gardens. Thank you so much for watching. See you later. Have a great night.